Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Kay of Cattle Buyers Weekly with some comments about the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Cattle on Feed report that came out about 30 minutes ago. The on-feed number for February 1 was 11.288 million. That was 94.3% of a year ago. Feedlots in January placed 1.858 million head. That was 104.0% of a year ago. And they marketed 1.737 million head, 93.7% of a year ago. I look at this report as slightly negative for a couple of reasons. I think the marketing number was slightly lower than anticipated and the placement number slightly higher than anticipated. And in particular, January marketings, if you take away the one less slaughter day we had this year compared to last year, it meant that the year-on-year comparison came in about 1.5 to 1.8% below last year. So clearly, cattle feeders didn't market quite enough cattle, and I'll mention that again in a moment. Placements in January, as I say, were above year-ago levels, and that's the first time in 6 months. And it really was despite heavily negative cattle feeding margins during the month. It was primarily the lack of wheat pasture on the southern plains that forced more cattle into feedlots. And you can see that by the increase in placements that came primarily in Texas, up 10%, in Kansas up 7%, and then less extent in Nebraska up 5%, and in Colorado up 11%. I think the placement number to me was also slightly negative because the weight breakdown showed the majority of the increase in placements were in the 700-pound and over category, the heavier weight category, of course. And those placements totaled 973,000 head, up 53,000 or 5.8% from the same month last year. Conversely, the under 700-pound total was 885,000, up only 18% or 2.0% from last year. Going back to the marketings in January, it's pretty clear that cattle feeders are doing their best to cattle under very difficult circumstances. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at two other key indicators, we can look at steer and heifer slaughter, but I want to look also at carcass weights. They're record heavy for this time of the year. Steer weights in the first week of February were 26 pounds heavier than last year, 855 pounds they averaged, and heifers were 18 pounds heavier. And then the other thing that I want to look at is that as far as the grading is concerned, we've had excellent weather during the feeding period this winter, and choice grading for the last week of January averaged just over 60%, and select cattle or cattle graded only 29.62% select. So we had literally twice as many cattle grading choice as select. And both those indicators to me are that cattle are coming out too heavy. They got a lot of finish on them, and that the industry has a lot of work to do in the coming months to redress that. So with those remarks, I'll say goodbye, and we'll talk to you again next month.